What's up, guys and gals? We are back, finally. We've been on a bit of a hiatus here at the Tech in Shanghai podcast, but everything has been smoothed out now, and we're going to be dropping shows every week with the best CEOs, founders, co-founders, tech personalities, and more from the Shanghai and China startup and technology scene. So to get things kicked off, we've got a guest that I've been trying to connect with for a very long time. We've been trying to put this together for a while, and we finally did, and it really did not disappoint. We've got Bobby Lee, co-founder and CEO of BTC China, on the show today, talking about all things Bitcoin. So if you've heard of Bitcoin, but not exactly sure how to approach it, or if you are kind of excited about it, but you don't know all the details, then this is a show that you'll definitely want to check out. We cover the history of Bitcoin, we cover BTC China and the roles that they're playing in the ecosystem. And then we talk about the future of Bitcoin and why it's probably going to be quite important to at least know certain things about it as we move forward in time. So we had a great chat. I was extremely grateful to finally get hooked up with Bobby. I hope you enjoy it. And from here on out, you'll be hearing from us on a weekly basis. So stay tuned and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Tech in Shanghai podcast, the Pearl of the Orient. Shanghai is the city of the future. All systems go, full steam ahead. It never stops. Technology, innovation, ambition. It's everywhere. Join us as we explore this new world and talk to the people making it happen. The Tech in Shanghai podcast. The future is now.
Bobby Lee, thank you for joining me.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
So this podcast has been a long time coming. I know we started talking, I think it was the beginning of the year, where I reached out to you and see if you'd come on the podcast, but through scheduling and life, things got in the way, but finally here we are. And I have to say, I've been looking forward to this a lot, so thank you very much for coming on.
That's great.
I think before we get going, I think I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself and the company just briefly to the audience, and then we'll get it rolling from there.
Sure. So I live in Shanghai now. This is where BTC China is headquartered. I've been in China for almost 9 years now. Moved here at the end of 2006. Did a few different things in different tech industries. And I won't go over the bio, but essentially started BTC China 2.5 years ago with my co-founders. So BTC China, we as a brand, as a website, we've been starting since June of 2011. We started as China's very first Bitcoin exchange. And over the last four years, we've expanded beyond just providing exchange service to many other cryptocurrency Bitcoin services.
Now, obviously, for most of our listeners, they'll probably have heard of Bitcoin before. Many maybe even have their own wallets and have traded or have transacted in Bitcoin. And certainly it's one of the hotter areas of quote-unquote technology these days. I mean, it's extremely exciting for a number of different reasons. And for that reason, it's kind of hard for me to figure out where to start here. But just as a history of the company, you came... BTC was already operating in some probably very minor capacity before you came on board. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So my two co-founders, they started the website as a part-time sort of hobby in June of 2011. And Bitcoin itself has only been around a little over 6 years. Bitcoin was invented, it was proposed in a paper published anonymously by Satoshi Nakamoto. That was in late 2008. And Bitcoin, the software, the protocol, the system came online in early 2009. And for the first 2 years, it was very, just a few people, maybe less than a dozen. And then by 2011, people started buying it, trading it. And there was a famous exchange called Mt. Gox, MT Gox, that was based out of Japan. That was US dollar exchange. And people started, that was the world's first Bitcoin exchange. Now, my co-founders realized that, hey, they wanted to play with Bitcoin, but they didn't know how to buy, sell. There was no trading platform in China, and it was hard for Chinese people to move money into Japan or move it to Mt. Gox. So my co-founders decided to start a Bitcoin exchange in China and called it BTC China. And they launched it in June of 2011. And back then, I think Bitcoin was trading, on pennies on the dollar. It was just very, very, it was just maybe a few users. It was very early days. And then for the first year and a half, they operated like that. And then by early 2013, I came around. I met them and suggested that we should start a company. We should build this into a big brand, a global company, get venture funding and so on.
Yeah.
So we established our headquarters in Shanghai. I came on as a sort of late third co-founder, became CEO, and went out fundraising, building the business, hiring people. So we went from just a few part-time people a staff in Shanghai, and started with 5, 10, 20. Eventually, now we're about 75 people.
Wow. So what I know from watching previous interviews on you that you were doing some mining. I think maybe you'd heard about Bitcoin from your brother, which is an interesting story that I want to touch on a bit later. But you were doing some mining, and then maybe the mining landscape changed, and you realized that it wasn't for you, or you couldn't make a run of it. So what led you to approaching BTC? Like, why did you want to get into Bitcoin, but get into Bitcoin in China and really make this your career and make this into the business as it is today?
Yeah. So my brother introduced me to Bitcoin in 2011, in early 2011. Mm-hmm. At the time, it was just a concept that was floating around on the internet. People played with some. They were mining it with their computers, and my brother started mining them in early 2011, and then I got into it. He convinced me to start mining it. I was trying it. So I got some graphics card, actually bought them from him, and set up a small mining rig in the summer, ran it for like 3 months. So that's how I earned my first few Bitcoins that summer. It was always in the back of my mind, this is a cool technology. I had a full-time job at then working for Walmart in China doing e-commerce. So I never thought about, doing a startup. It was the farthest thing away from doing a startup, right? Mm-hmm. So by late 2012, after I left Walmart, I was deciding what's my next career. Should I move to Beijing, take on another corporate job, do executive management type stuff, or should I could do a startup? And if I did a startup, I promised myself back then in 2011 I would do a startup in Bitcoin. So that's how I got started thinking about doing a startup in Bitcoin. So the mining gave me a taste for it, but I didn't really do too much with Bitcoin until I really committed full time, and that's when I got together to do this.
Well, it's certainly a bold approach. You decided that this is what you wanted to be into. I'm sure you caught the Bitcoin bug like so many people, and you decided, well, go right to the source. Let's get in touch with these exchange guys and see what we can do.
And people ask me why China, and I'm like, very simple. I was in China, right. No other reason. I didn't come to China for Bitcoin, but I was in China. I was living in Shanghai, and I wanted to do a startup. I wanted to do it in Bitcoin, and that's when I decided to put the three together.
Right. So I feel like Bitcoin in general, for whatever reason, kind of has a lot of like mysterious lore associated with it. The whole Satoshi Nakamoto thing where, I still to this day, unless you've got some breaking news, he's an anonymous character. Nobody really knows who he is. And then it's an interesting, as far as startups go, as far as kind of paradigm changing technologies go, Bitcoin seems to have like a lot of interesting lore associated with it. And I guess the reason why I bring this up is because your brother, for people that don't know, is involved in Litecoin.
That's right.
Right?
That's
so
right.
He's actually the creator or founder of Litecoin?
Yes,
right.
Yes.
So before, when I was getting ready for this interview, I was thinking, well, I wonder what their like family dinners are like if they're sitting around the table, laughing about global cryptocurrency domination, or what the nature of those conversations is like. So if you can I know he introduced you to Bitcoin, and that's how you got into it. For those that don't know, what is the difference between Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, Litecoin, Dogecoin, whatever it might be?
Yeah. So Bitcoin is, let's take a step back. What is Bitcoin? Why is that word all of a sudden a buzz in the tech community, in the world, the media and all that? Why are governments talking about it? Like, what the heck? What's a big deal, right? Bitcoin, if you explain it, it's a digital currency. More specifically, it's a digital cryptocurrency. Crypto is the word for cryptography, which is which mathematics for security, for how to make things secret. Cryptography. So it uses these technologies like private key, public key. These are things that make communication online secure. How do you send a credit card online through secure communication, through cryptography and all that. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is, in essence, the world's first successful digital currency. And we think currencies we use in our pocket in China is renminbi, CNY. In the U.S. is U.S. dollar, Hong Kong dollar, or euros, or Japanese yen, and so on. We're familiar with currencies all our life. But the currencies we use in the real world is paper currency, is coins and notes. And banks, we keep track of that through bank accounts and all that. even though we may have online banking, the money we have on our online bank, the amount we see, that's not a digital currency. That's just an online representation of how much I have held with the bank. And then how do I get that out? I go to the bank, request a withdrawal, or go to the ATM, put in my ATM card, and get the physical money out. So money is very much physical, even though it can be transmitted digitally through banking systems and PayPal, Alipay, WeChat Pay, and all that. But Bitcoin is the world's first purely digital currency. What that means is there is no physical instantiation. It's just from accounts transferred to other accounts. And how is it protected? It's protected by cryptography, a lot of mathematics and computer science behind it. But the other idea is that it's a decentralized currency, meaning that this is a digital asset class that is not issued or controlled by any central bank or by any government in the world. So this is a very difficult topic for most people to understand. It's very new. It's very different. And that's why Bitcoin is a big deal, is because it's so different. It's like an alien coming onto the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just an extension of that, again, I guess for those people that really have only heard of Bitcoin in passing and in tech news and not a great understanding of it, I think, like you just said, you gave a good foundation. But one of the things I just wanted to make clear, I guess, to people listening, to demystify it a little bit, I mean, it would take several hours of a podcast to do that totally. But I guess just to describe, because one of the things I want to get into is the creation of Bitcoin and the creation of fiat money and value in general, and go down that kind of rabbit hole. But just, can you explain, because I'm sure you can do so better than me, how mining and the blockchain are two aspects of the creation of Bitcoin?
Yeah. So Bitcoin, when it was invented by this guy, he names himself Satoshi Nakamoto. He proposed in a white paper in 2008, and he proposed, at the time when he proposed it, it sounded ludicrous. How could you have that? Basically, he wanted a electronic cash that is purely peer-to-peer, that is not issued or controlled by any existing central organization or government. So he wanted to create this new thing out of thin air that's electronic and peer-to-peer. And along with that came anonymity. Along with it came, no chargebacks and very low transaction fees and instant confirmations and all that stuff that make Bitcoin what it is today. So Satoshi Nakamoto, we still don't know who he is. There's some good guesses who he is. There's a reason why he wanted to be anonymous. We think it's because this is so revolutionary. It's counter to the system. Right, it could be perceived as an attack on the existing system, and the existing system has a lot of stakeholders, whether it's governments or the whole market, the banking system. So that's why it was a huge risk in the beginning, and it was worthless in the beginning. Now, back to your question about the mining stuff. When he invented Bitcoin, the big dilemma was, how do I make it successful? He thought it was going to be useful, but for it to be useful, it has to be widespread. So how do I get it widespread? So if he held on to all the amount of Bitcoin in circulation, then no one would get into it. No one would use it. He would have to sell it, and it would be a scheme or whatever. So instead, what he decided was the only fair way to get this into the masses was to create a free lottery system, and that's what we have today. Today, Bitcoin is essentially given out for free through this Bitcoin lottery system.
Right.
We call this mining today. The term mining refers to this system. And I use the term lottery because that's the easiest way to explain to people. Essentially, he decided from day one that, hey, we should just let anyone who wants Bitcoin and come and get it. And what he did in the program was he made a schedule. He designed a schedule where Bitcoin will be issued over a period of 100 plus years, 120 years or something like that. And he capped the amount of Bitcoins in circulation. He said forever there will only be 21 million Bitcoins. It will be given out in this free lottery system over 120 odd years. And however, it will not be given out evenly. It will be given out what they called basically, half of it will be given out within 4 years, and then every 4 years, another half of that will be given out. So it goes something like 10.5 million for the first 4 years, another 5 million for the next 4 years, and then 2.5 million for the third 4 years. So that's why in January of 2009, there were 0 Bitcoins in circulation. And then what happens, every 10 minutes, there will be a lottery for 50 Bitcoins. And the way to participate in the lottery is to do a small computation using computer. And however many people participated, the lottery will pick someone randomly, and that person will get that one Bitcoin, or the 50 Bitcoins.
Yep.
And that's called the block, the one block of 50 block reward, 50 Bitcoins. And so it's been 50 Bitcoins as a block reward every 10 minutes for the first 4 years. And today we're 2015. It turns out we're already in the second phase. So now the block reward is half, is 25 Bitcoins.
Right.
So right now, as we're doing this podcast, every 10 minutes that goes by, roughly, there's one lottery winner. He or she gets 25 Bitcoins. And how do you win the lottery? You use your own computers or mining hardware to do these math calculations. And if you're lucky, you win the ticket, then you'll get 25 Bitcoins.
Right.
But as we know, a lot of people are playing the lottery. There are thousands and thousands of machines right now doing computation, trying to win these lottery tickets and win the lottery. And what happens is the whole thing is called mining. Yeah.
So am I right in saying that obviously Satoshi had to come up with a way to, in order for it to be a decentralized currency, administration of that currency or that technology had to come from separate nodes all over the world, not one central place. So mining seems to be kind of a decentralized administration network where all the different transactions that are coming through with Bitcoin, these quote-unquote miners are basically organizing these transactions and verifying them.
That's right.
And they get them rewarded for the verification that they provide.
Yes,
right?
yes. This is the hidden side of it, which I didn't explain properly, is that the action of mining actually helps confirm and solidify all the transactions.
Right.
So unlike any other payment network or any other payment system, all the transactions for Bitcoin, all the sends and receives, are actually publicly visible on the blockchain.
Right.
So there are multiple websites that you can go out there and query and see which transaction was sent from when, for how much, from which account to which account. So that's all publicly visible. These transactions are all so-called formalized by the mining effort. So every 10 minutes, a new batch of transactions are formalized. They're called what they call confirmed by the blockchain. And that's what happens. So the miners are actually doing work that's good for the Bitcoin ecosystem, which is by confirming transactions.
Right.
So every time there's a prize for the 25 Bitcoin now, we're actually confirming transactions, making that solidified. And then over time, this is a public record. So every Bitcoin transaction that's ever been sent is now in the blockchain, foreverly cast in stone, so to speak.
Right. And one of the questions I had for you, because I have a cursory understanding of how it all works, but with mining, obviously there's been a dramatic ramp up in mining as Bitcoin becomes more popular and in greater use and in greater demand. Does the scale up in mining or the competitiveness of the mining quote unquote industry have any impact on Bitcoin value or use, or is it just kind of an outgrowth of popularity of Bitcoin, of demand for Bitcoin?
There is. It ties into a little bit as well. So the mining industry is very interesting. It started out, very, very early days, if you will. It was just people, it was just Satoshi, whoever he was, and one other person maybe. They were just using the program, and literally you could click on a mouse button and say, "Hey, I want dibs for the next batch of 50 Bitcoins."
Right.
And if there's only two of us, it's either you or me. It's 10 minutes is you, maybe the next 10 minutes me, and it's very fun. We'd be making hundreds or thousands of Bitcoins a day or two, right? When there are more people, that's when it gets competitive.
Right.
So in the beginning, it was what we call CPU mining. Literally, notebooks or computers, you just click on it and you get the Bitcoins. It's for free, right? The only cost was just plugging your computer and having your software running and paying attention, clicking the mouse. Now, over time, that evolved into what they called GPU mining. So someone figured out, I think in 2010, 2011, you could use graphics cards to do the same calculation at 10 times the speed. So now people who had graphics cards had an edge. You could get 10 times the number of lottery tickets for the same amount of work. So you had a higher chance of winning. So everybody went to graphics cards mining, GPU mining.
Yeah.
That went to FPGA mining. These are field programmable gate array logic chips. And then that went on to ASIC mining. ASICs are application-specific ICs. These are custom-made hardware chips for that. That was in 2012, 2013. Now we're like sixth generation. We're like at 14 nanometer, 28 nanometer ASICs. So it's very, very competitive. So what used to be maybe your chip could do maybe hundreds or maybe thousands of calculations per second turned into
Trillions.
Millions. So thousands would be kilo hashes. How many hashes per second? So CPU, GPU mining, it was in kilo hashes, and by GPU is in mega hashes. So meaning a graphics chip could do maybe 20 or 200 million calculations per second. And then it went to gigahashes for ASICs. So the early chips could do maybe 10, 50 gigahashes, billions of operations per second. Then they went to terahashes, which is trillions of calculations per second. Now we have something called petahashes, which is quadrillion hashes per second, and then we're going to soon have things above that.
Right.
So it's gone up very, very fast. It's like an arms race. But at the same time, it's still only 25 Bitcoins per 10 minutes. So how do you justify investing all this hardware to get only 25 Bitcoins? Well, guess what? The good thing is Bitcoin price value has gone up.
Right.
That's why I can sustain this level of mining activity. So there will be something coming up, which is the halving of Bitcoin.
But because all of this mining activity needs transactions, right? The transactions have to be there for the mining to verify to get the reward. Is that right?
No, technically not. Technically not.
Okay.
Even if there are no transactions, the mining rewards would still come out.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a small quirk in the system.
And just a question, another question on the mining. Obviously, the price in Bitcoin has been volatile. We'll get into that a little bit later. But with the increasing competitiveness of mining,
yes.
I mean, the increasing amount of investment required to be competitive, do these dramatic price swings really, put a crunch or put a hurt on these miners? Because you put a ton of investment into mining, let's say at a Bitcoin price of 800 USD, and then it drops down to what currently 260 or in that ballpark.
Absolutely.
Then
yeah,
that's a big move.
So we see that as BTC China, we operate one of the largest mining pools. We have about 13% of the mining power out there, or pool. A mining pool is just where we get together a bunch of people who want to mine together and share the rewards together. What we see is when prices go down, what happens for some people out there, the electricity cost or hardware cost, it's not worth it. So they actually turn the machines off. So when prices come down, the aggregate mining power out there actually goes down. Likewise, when Bitcoin prices go up, if it would go to $250 to $500, $1,000 in the next month, what happens? A lot more people would be mining. There'd be a lot more hardware. Mining machines would come back on. This is actually normal. This is actually supply and demand. This is regular economics because we see this in the gold industry as well. And even in the oil industry, when gold prices go down, some of the gold mines just stop mining because it's not worth it anymore.
Right.
Same with oil, right? If oil prices come down, a lot of oil wells, they just let it sit. Whereas if oil prices or gold prices go up, there's more interest and more exploration and more activity going on. Yeah.
So just to bring everyone up to speed, we've got the creation of Bitcoin in 2008 and the launch of 2009 with Satoshi Nakamoto. A decentralized, anonymous network of value transfer using cryptocurrencies, right? Which is administrated by miners in the network. So that's the decentralized aspect of it. You can send Bitcoin from one place to another almost free. I know there's typically some charges involved, but I think one of the questions that gets asked a lot is, when is Bitcoin going to become mainstream? Now, I know there's several variables involved in that, but to bring it around to be relevant to what you guys are doing here, once you have an understanding of Bitcoin, and let's say you do ascribe to it a certain amount of value and usefulness, I feel like the getting of Bitcoin is still a gray area for a lot of people, because it's not the same as putting money into your PayPal account and then being able to spend it on different merchants. So, being that you're in BTC China as an exchange, can you tell us how to get your hands on some Bitcoin, and then we'll work on what to do with it once you have some.
Yeah. So getting Bitcoin is indeed difficult part, and the reason is Bitcoin operates in the cloud. It's a cyber cryptocurrency, and the money we have in our pocket is very much the current financial system. How do you bridge that gap? That's where the exchanges come in. So what we do is we provide a service where people who want to buy Bitcoins or sell Bitcoins would use the Bitcoin exchange, and you essentially deposit money into the Bitcoin exchange. So in our case, we accept deposits in China using taking Chinese renminbi. You send it to our accounts, and then you would get a credit in your account online at BTCCHina.com, and you would then be able to place an order to buy the Bitcoins. And then once you have the Bitcoins, you would then be able to withdraw it and send it to whichever Bitcoin wallet you want. Or you could also elect to hold it in our wallet. We have a Bitcoin wallet that you could hold your Bitcoins in as well. And once you have it in Bitcoin, then you can send it anywhere in the world to any other person, essentially frictionless.
Right.
Yeah.
And
very fast.
The price of Bitcoin varies from exchange to exchange, right? Not a great deal, but there is variance, is there not?
Yeah. The reason is it's a true market, meaning that Bitcoin, the prices fluctuate minute by minute. In the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes, Bitcoin price has gone up or gone down by a little bit. And it fluctuates globally, but essentially it holds steady pretty much throughout the world. Because if Bitcoin prices are higher in one place by 5%, you'll see people coming in and say selling it at a higher price, buying at a lower price, and it'll balance out over time.
Right. So is it a misconception that Bitcoins are hard to acquire and use, or because for something to really breach the mainstream consumer market, it has to be pretty thoughtless, pretty smooth, right? And up to this point, Bitcoin has had the whole picture wasn't clear to people, and maybe that's what's keeping people out. But from your perspective, what's for people that are interested, that see the value in Bitcoin from a transaction point of view, from an investment point of view, and from a political point of view, what's keeping them from crossing the chasm to actually having Bitcoin and using Bitcoin? Yeah,
it's a matter of perspective. Compared to 4 years ago when we started, Bitcoin today is a lot easier to acquire and hold. The technology is a lot more mature than 4 years ago. But compared to 4 years from now, we're still in a very difficult stage. Bitcoin today is not easily accessible by everyone. That's what BTC China is about. We're all about blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies. So our mission is to make this easy and simple for everyone. We believe in a future where everyone uses Bitcoin, where digital assets are held by everyone. Today, the vast majority of your audience own assets that are physical in nature, whether it's money in their pockets, whether it's money in the bank accounts or stocks, bonds, real estate, cars, or any other assets they have, whether it's shoes or purses and all that stuff. They're all physical in nature. But as you know, we're in the digital age already. We're in the internet age. We have email for 20 years. We have websites, and now we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we have WeChat and all that. Our kids and grandkids will be even more immersed in the so-called internet, whether it's through smartphones, Apple Watches, Google Glasses, or whatever. We can't even imagine now. So I firmly believe in the future where digital assets is something that's going to be widely held throughout the world. And whether it's Bitcoin or not remains to be seen. But think about in 20 years from now, when digital assets are widely held, there will be companies out there that will provide services to assist people to manage and invest and protect the digital assets, as well as converting back and forth into physical assets. Yeah. So that's what BTC China, that's what we aim to do.
I feel like Bitcoin is one of those technologies that, because it's so groundbreaking, it's because it's so kind of revolutionary, that of course in the present moment, in the time that it's kind of trying to stake its claim to legitimacy, of course it's a huge uphill battle. I mean, everyone in Bitcoin, I'm sure, experiences that battle on a day-to-day basis. But I feel like, as you were saying, in 20 years' time, we'll look back on this period, or we'll look on Bitcoin and say, well, it was self-evident. Of course, in the society we're living in and in the world we live in, of course digital currency was going to emerge. Of course it was going to become an enormous part of our day-to-day lives. And all that, hard work hopefully won't be totally forgotten by the people that are using it. But I'm constantly interested in how, just over a period of maybe even 10 years, looking back on things, your mainstream layman in 10 years' time will look on Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency is predominant at the time and say, yeah, well, obviously I need digital currency to do all this amazing stuff that I'm now doing. But in the present moment, it's still a matter of convincing people and putting in the infrastructure and promoting the legitimacy and making it easy for people and making it accessible. I mean, and I think that is the realm of revolutionary technologies generally.
Yeah, I want to add to that, which is it's comparable to internet or to email 20 years ago. I tell people assume this, like you said, like we're as Bitcoin entrepreneurs, we're pushing so hard to make Bitcoin, to make it successful, pushing it, working with governments, with regulators, with media, with mass consumers for adoption. And the reality is, in some sense, I could care less. And here's what I mean by that. Bitcoin is already moderately successful today. We're not at the end of Bitcoin, meaning it's moderately successful. I say that there's two sides to that coin, which is compared to 6 years ago, Bitcoin is wildly successful. But compared to 60 years from now, this is the birth of Bitcoin. And the reason Bitcoin is successful today is not because there was people pushing for it. This is not a pump and dump or a Ponzi scheme where there's people out there pushing to succeed and then taking money cash out. The reason Bitcoin is relevant today and successful today is purely because of its attributes and its what it brings to society. meaning that if the non-Bitcoin technologies existing today could provide what Bitcoin did, Bitcoin wouldn't have been invented.
Right.
Bitcoin wouldn't be where it is today. It's because the existing systems cannot do what Bitcoin does. That's why people choose and to come to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Just like email was 20 years ago, whether it's Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, or Google Mail. Why did people use it? There was no email coalition or consortium that was out and against the postal mail and stamps and paper and pens. It wasn't like that. Email was invented. People had a choice to use email or to send letters by paper and pen and put a stamp on it. People still have a choice to send mail by stamps. But the vast majority of communication is no longer via paper or in postal mail. A lot of it is over email. A lot of it is now even over social media. Right. That's how technologies evolve.
Sure.
So we think Bitcoin will be used more and more. Digital currencies will be used more and more over time because of what it provides in terms of convenience and security.
I'm glad you brought that point up because I think kind of what you're talking about in broad strokes is inherent value, right? So the people that recognize Bitcoin, that understand Bitcoin, they see or understand, maybe subjectively and both subjectively and objectively, that it has quote unquote inherent value. But one of the things I wanted to ask you today is because a lot of times people that are adamant or passionate about Bitcoin, they'll have pretty strong opinions about fiat currency and the existing financial, economic, and banking system today. So I wanted to just because in a lot of interviews you hear, well, it doesn't have any inherent value, and a lot of people may not understand the world of fiat money today and how it works and how, paper money is really just that these days. It's backed by the confidence of the government and nothing more in most cases anymore. So when we talk about value, and I think this is an important consideration that everyone at some point will have to come across if they're going to adopt Bitcoin and use it in their lives, how should people be looking at the value of Bitcoin? Like what's Bitcoin's inherent value, in comparison to something like the US dollar and to gold? Compared to those two specifically.
So let's do, I think it's three different things. Bitcoin, gold, and US dollar are separate things. Let's talk about US dollar. US dollar is just it's a world's most recognized and most trustworthy reserve currency globally, right? So it's gained that status. But in the end, it's a fiat currency, meaning that the government, United States and the Federal Reserve can decide how much US dollars to print, how to denominate it, and so on, and to how much taxes to collect and all that. So all the policies by the government will affect the usefulness of the US dollar. In theory, the government could even cancel the US dollar and go to the US dollar too, and just, we've seen that happen time and time again in history.
Yep.
So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin's completely different. Bitcoin is not a centrally issued currency. Bitcoin is closer to just you and I having an agreement that these marbles are what you and I will do business in. If we have a collection of marbles, somehow we have marbles when our kids growing up, we're playing with it. We have 15 or 21 marbles. John, you and me, we decide, hey, I want to do business with you over the next 50, 100 years. And we just make an agreement. Marbles are the way to do it. And there's 21 marbles. We could exchange favors, buy dinners, split bills, take taxis or whatever services, and using marbles. Now, as long as the marbles are not easily created, such that you cannot cheat and make more marbles, as long as they're recognizable, I don't see counterfeits, then we can agree to that system. So that's what it is. Bitcoins are just digital tokens that exist as an electronic form. That there's a counter that says how many I have, how many you have, and I can give you some and you can give me some. But unlike the past digital things whether it's digital photographs or spreadsheets or whatever, in the past, when we shared digital information, it was only sharing. I would make copies for you, and we would both have the copy. Imagine a digital camera. I take pictures. I share with you. You can share with 100 people. Now all 100 people have the image. But with Bitcoin, the notion is if I have a token of Bitcoin, once I give it to you, either 1 or half or 0.25, then you would have the amount, and I would have less of that amount. That's what the innovation is. So Bitcoin is just a shared token system, and the value is what we place on it. If we think one Bitcoin is worth one can of soda, that's fine. Maybe 10,000 Bitcoins for one pizza, that's fine. Maybe one Bitcoin for an ounce of gold, that's also fine. It's whatever you and I want. So it's not tied to anything. Just like the only denomination of Bitcoin is just Bitcoin. Same with gold. So the reason gold became the world's most widely used form of money, in the last 5,000 years, we have different pockets of civilizations that have come and gone. But throughout the earth, gold and silver became the most recognized form of money. And there's a reason behind that. There was no emperor or some lord or some god that says thou shalt use gold as a currency. It wasn't the case because there was no global religion, there was no global boss, there was no global overlord. Why did gold become used worldwide? Gold and silver is because of its attributes. The fact that it was scarce, the fact that it was recognizable, it was fungible. You can create coins out of it. You can melt it. You could break one large piece of gold down to 10 pieces, and you can take 10 small pieces of gold, melt it together, and make it into one large piece again. Right? You could make it pure. It's not easily counterfeitable. It was convenient. It was dense, and it didn't corrode. It wouldn't melt away. It doesn't just self-destruct or disappear. So that's why gold became a useful version of currency, a monetary instrument, where I could use it instead of barter. So gold and silver became that. And I argue Bitcoin today is valuable. Why does Bitcoin have a market price of $260 today? Why? There's no Alan Greenspan or Bobby Lee saying Bitcoin has to be $260. But rather the market says, hey, it's useful. I use it to trade this and this and that, and that's how it should be. So there's only a certain amount of Bitcoin in circulation. There's about 14 million units of Bitcoin in circulation that will eventually hit 21 million over the next 100 years. And more importantly, it has certain attributes that nothing in the world has. It's decentralized. It's limited in quantity. It's hard to get. It's hard to counterfeit. You cannot counterfeit it. It's fungible. You can bring it to smaller units and make larger units out of it. And it's permanent. And these qualities give it value. That's why people say, aha, I like that.
Right.
Look what happened last week. The renminbi fell in value by 2, 3, 4, 5% in a single week. So if I made money in China, which I did, good thing I don't have millions of renminbi in the bank account. It all fell down by 2, 3, 4%.
Yeah.
But the idea is it only fell by 2, 3, 4% in a week. What's going to happen in 20 years? In the last 9 years I've been in China, John, in the last 9 years, the amount of renminbi in circulation has increased by 3 to 4x. And these are government numbers.
Yeah.
In reality, it could be higher, potentially. Right? So look at how much money has been in the system in the last 8-9 years, whether US dollar, Japanese yen, or euros. How much money got printed? And you have your $1 million in the bank. Is it worth as much as it was 10 years ago?
Definitely not.
Is that what you want? If you had $1 million to save, most people don't, but let's say you had $1 million to save for the future. What you could do with that money today is a lot. You could go on cruises, you can go to restaurants, you can go take vacations, buy cars, you could do a lot, buy houses. Now, if you put it in the bank or in stocks or whatever, in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years for your kids and grandkids, will it still have the same purchasing power? Why did you save the money? It's for the purchasing power, right?
And if we look at the purchasing power of one currency, the US dollar, let's say since 1913, I believe, at the inception of the Federal Reserve, I think maybe it's down roughly 90% in terms of its value, purchasing power.
It's really,
So what's really interesting about Bitcoin, and I think, for those people that notice those attributes that you're referring to, it's a no-brainer. They're like, well, yeah. But what's really interesting is it's occurring at a time when fiat money, government-issued currency is kind of going in the opposite direction. So Bitcoin, correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of inherently deflationary because the quantity is going down over time.
Sure.
Whereas governments all around the world, central banks, because of the economic climate and just because it's kind of inherent in the system that they've created for themselves, is inherently inflationary.
Yes.
And they get to just say, okay, we're going to make 1 billion of these tomorrow, but trust us, it'll all work out, and we'll make sure that it'll balance and you won't lose all that hard-earned money that you made for yourself. And I mean, it's a very young system. I believe 1971 was when it completely untethered from a gold standard.
It's only been 44 years.
And I feel like we'll look back on that time and be like, what the hell were they thinking? Because of course people in positions of power and government, and again, there's no even need to go down any conspiracy track or whatever. It's just the nature of having that control over something so valuable. Of course, when push comes to shove, you're going to shove a little bit and shove a little bit and shove a little bit. And you do that over a period of maybe 40, 50, 60 years. We'll see how long it can go. And it seems all roads seem to lead to debasement of currencies,
That's
and
right.
we need a new currency. And as you mentioned before, throughout history, we've seen currencies die and new currencies take their place with a couple little changes. But why people are so excited about Bitcoin is because those attributes that you were mentioning kind of negate the possibility of that happening with Bitcoin. You know, it can't be controlled by one person. It can't be issued by one governing body. So with all that excitement around Bitcoin, I want to ask you, what are the drawbacks? What could happen to derail Bitcoin? Or what are the drawbacks inherent in Bitcoin? And then we might get to some of the ways that Bitcoin may come into some slowdown or come into some conflict.
Sure. To recap the previous point, Bitcoin is only successful because of the new possibility it brings compared to the past regime, or how it's different from the existing system of the fiat system. So Bitcoin itself is not perfect. Right? Nothing in the world is perfect if you want to be very generic. Bitcoin is very hard to understand, number one. It took me a long time to understand. You know, I have I have 2 degrees in computer science from Stanford, and it took me a while to understand Bitcoin. And obviously, I haven't even gone through and looked at the source code to understand the details in there.
It doesn't give everyone else much hope.
Well, no, that's not necessarily true. It's like same thing I tell people. Gold, I trust gold. I buy gold,
right?
But I haven't looked at gold in an atomic microscope. Right? I haven't looked at gold in an electron microscope. I haven't seen the protons or the neutrons or electrons of gold. Right. I don't have to see it because I could sort of take that for granted from the chemists and the physicists who understand gold.
You know how to get it. You know how to use it. That's what's
and
most important.
It's solid to me.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin today is solid to me, even though I don't get to hold it. So the point there is, it took me a good 2 years before I really trusted Bitcoin to create my own wallets, to put my own Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin, hold it. So now, one of the big downsides of Bitcoin is it's so complicated because it's so different. And it might take a generation or half a generation of time for people to really believe in it. It's kind of like the early days of email and e-commerce. Who would have trusted sending a credit card or buying books through the internet back in 1995? That was 20 years ago. Right? This year marks the 20th anniversary of Amazon. But back then I trusted it because I was, at Stanford. I was in college. I'll do that. But my mother, my other aunts and uncles, they wouldn't have trusted e-commerce.
Right.
But today, 2015, e-commerce is whatever, no problem. Right? We routinely send money over WeChat Pay or PayPal. So it might take that long. So that's a downside. The other downside is that we'll see. What do you have in mind? Anything specific on the downside of Bitcoin?
Well, no, because I look at Bitcoin and I think, wow, the possibilities are really exciting, and as I mentioned before, from an economic, financial, transactional point of view, from a political point of view, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's lots of stuff going on in the world today, and those people that control currency have lots of control over a number of different areas. So when that control is decentralized, then I think it creates a lot of exciting possibilities for the people of Earth, shall we call it.
Yeah, that's right.
But I guess one of the things in today's landscape, as I mentioned before, we've got a couple of different coins, right? Your brother's involved in Litecoin, and there's Dogecoin, and anyone can create a coin, really.
How does it? Yeah.
So, do you think the future of cryptocurrencies is, one dominates, and most of the people of the world transact in that because it has the liquidity, it has the stability of price, etc.? Or do you think we're going into a time, 20 years down the road, as you mentioned, do you think there'll be like coin-specific industries where, people transact in certain coins if they want to do X, and people transact in certain coins if they want to do Y? I mean, how do you see it?
I definitely see it's going to be one dominant cryptocurrency. Right. One dominant one, and then the other ones will be on the side. Kind of like these are global standards. Think about the keyboard that we have on our computers or on the touch screen. We all have come to use standardized QWERTY keyboard. It turns out there's many keyboard layouts. In Europe, the French use the AZERTY layout. There's the Dvorak layout. And there's all these different layouts. Some are more efficient. Some can do layout just A through Z, in sequence. But the reason we agreed to do QWERTY is because that's what most people are familiar with. So it's a global standard. Same with the US dollar, same with many aspects of standardized technologies. So I truly believe Bitcoin is the leading one. It's going to be the leading one. It's the network effect. And it comes back down, will Bitcoin succeed? It comes down to the alternatives. If one day the governments get their act together and provide the same benefits of Bitcoin, then we don't need Bitcoin. I'll say that. I'll be the first to say that. If governments can guarantee that my money is truly mine, that my $1 million will truly have the same or more purchasing power today in future than today, if they can guarantee that I can send my money anywhere I want, fast, with low fees, with no interruption, and I could do it electronically, heck, I'll take the government's money. And they can also guarantee the government will not go bust. Right? If the government can guarantee me all these things, I'll take the government's money. But look what's happened time and time again. Governments go bust. Right? Regimes go bust. Currencies go bust. Monies inflate. Inflation can go to hyperinflation. And they put in controls and requirements on my money and my assets. So I argue today we actually don't have freedom. So we have all the freedoms we think we do. And I know we're doing the recording in China, but if you look at the United States or Canada, North America, it's very common to talk about the freedom of information, freedom of the right to vote, the right to a fair trial, freedom of speech, all these great things, human rights and all that stuff. But what we're missing is freedom of assets. Do the Americans in the free countries, do the people actually have freedom to their own assets? And under today's economy or under today's regime, I argue that's not a clear yes.
Right. And if it's not a clear yes, then there are some interesting philosophical tracks you could go down in terms of broader freedom, right? Because if you don't have access to freedom of assets, then how does that affect your life? How does that affect your day-to-day obligations, right? Because someone else, you're putting all this work into acquiring things, into building value, and then you have no control over it, but somebody else is dictating what the value of what you've accumulated is.
That's right. And that's where Bitcoin provides a different answer. Right? Bitcoin wouldn't be successful today if the existing providers gave us that freedom of asset.
Right. So that brings us to one of the questions that's often asked, but I have to ask it here because it is so relevant. But in conversation, a lot of times you'll hear people talk about Bitcoin and all the great things about it, and lots of the things we've been talking about today. But then when it finally comes to the crux of it, you say, well, it is very disruptive to the global financial system, right? So a lot of people would think when it comes to the point where it seems like it might actually, that tipping point, will not the major financial institutions and governments globally do everything in their power to resist? Because they understand the importance of their hold on currency and financial system in general.
Not necessarily. I think companies are smart. The banking, the financial institution, they're smart. They'll do whatever it takes to make money. They're not in it for the money. They're not in it for the US dollar. They're in it for the money. So whether US dollar stays or euro stays, they'll just shift to whatever model that allow the companies to survive. And I have full faith in that. The question is, many countries have strong currencies: the United States, the euro, the yen, the sterling pound, the renminbi, and so on. But I fear for the other smaller countries with their own state-issued currencies. Those are going to be the first to go.
Yeah. Well,
right? When the word gets out that, oh my gosh, this is a house of cards. These fiat currencies, they're just printing and printing and printing. Look at Argentina, look at Brazil, look at what almost happened in Greece, or what could still happen in Greece, right? The euro and all these African countries. I grew up in Africa, and I saw how terrible it was with the inflation and all that.
Yeah.
Those were most at risk.
Yeah.
If they can't provide a compelling currency, then they might as well go to a different hard currency.
And I feel like the timing of this is so, in 20 years' time, I think they'll be writing books about just the drama of the times that we're living in right now, because this emerging alternative to a currency asset is emerging, but is it emerging soon enough for the people that may need it? You mentioned Argentina, you mentioned potentially Greece, and at the moment, the answer would probably be no, right? It's not. It doesn't have the liquidity. It doesn't have the ease of access and use that people would need for it to totally replace a national currency. But you can easily see how it might in the future, right?
Yeah, that's right. So in the end, people use currency. So people, in the end, as information gets more widespread, you know what the internet has done for us in the last 20 years? The internet has given us freedom of information, a guarantee that information will flow more freely around the world. Mm-hmm. Before the internet, it wasn't that case. So with more information freedom, I think we will have more asset freedom. Mm-hmm. I think over time, people all around the world will realize they have a choice. They can either take their wages in some African or South American currency that is totally out of whack, mm-hmm. or they could take it in something more concrete, whether it's a US dollar, the renminbi, or something even crypto, mm-hmm. digital currency like Bitcoin or Litecoin or Dogecoin.
And being in the position that you are, at the CEO of an exchange, a lot is said about the volatility of the price in Bitcoin. And I think, anybody who keeps an eye on it kind of understands why. But obviously, if something is going to develop into something with mainstream usability and adoption in terms of a currency, volatility has to be relatively, it can't be very volatile, right? So how do you view, let's say over the next 10 years, how do you view the volatility of Bitcoin?
I don't, it's a matter of perspective. I don't see Bitcoin as being very, very volatile. If anything, Bitcoin's the most stable thing in the world because there's only so much in supply. Mm-hmm. It's a reverse way of thinking. Think of a barrel of petroleum, crude oil that mm-hmm. they get from underground. Oil prices we know has come down a lot in the last 6 months, 12 months. And, to me, a barrel of oil, the potential energy in there has remained the same. Mm-hmm. What's happened in the price is just the fluctuations of the economy. Right, it's really when something goes up and down. Are you sure that it if I see the sun or the moon go up and down in the sky, is it really the sun and moon going up, or is it really me going up and down? Mm-hmm. What's it's a matter of perspective, right? So I don't think Bitcoin is volatile in that sense. I think if I want to hold an asset for long term, I think Bitcoin is a great asset to hold. Whereas currencies is what's happening. What we see is fluctuation currency. Right. So from China, we live in China. We thought the U.S. dollar went up by 5% last week. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case. Yeah. From the perspective of an American or a European, the Chinese renminbi went down by 5% in the last week.
So, I hear what you're saying, but if we look at, let's say, a year ago, let's say Bitcoin's high, right? It was like $1,200, something like that.
Yeah, now it's $260.
Now $260. So, let's say someone was earning their wages in Bitcoin, which maybe people in this office do that. But in those terms, in a short-term non-investment scenario, but it's just your wages and you rely on those wages to pay for your life, even if it's not totally possible in all areas right now with Bitcoin. It would seem that and whether it's a result of other currencies, their volatility, it still seems somewhat volatile as a form of, as a wage, right?
Yeah.
So if we accept that there's that sort of volatility, do you see that continuing as more people come in, or is it kind of like an ebb and flow, and it'll happen in different periods?
Yeah. Great question. Thank you for keeping me on track. So the good news is, in the last 1 year, in the last 2 years, Bitcoin is a lot more stable than compared to the mm-hmm. early years, mm-hmm. and the reason is we have more exchanges globally. So we have a lot of exchanges globally now help balance out the prices globally for Bitcoin. So that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. However, that said, I think today's Bitcoin price is nowhere near the ultimate value of Bitcoin. For 21 million Bitcoins spread amongst 7 billion people mm-hmm. in the world of in the connected world, in a technology society, in 50 years, 100 years, it's nowhere near the 4 billion worth of circulation, mm-hmm. unless the U.S. dollar is going to be a lot more worth a lot more money in 20 years. My belief is the U.S. dollar is going to be more and more U.S. dollars in 20 years, such that $1 million will be in everyone's hand easily. Mm-hmm. I think people will be making $500,000 to $1 million salaries in 10 years and 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
By then, do you think Bitcoin will still be $260 per Bitcoin? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be at least 100 times or more.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, if some asset has to go up a factor of 100 times in a short span of 5 to 10 years, that price increase of the asset will not be linear. It will not be a straight line up.
Mm-hmm.
It will be very bumpy, highs and lows, and at times it will be way overvalued, at times it will be way undervalued.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for it to climb up that 100x curve in a short 5 years or 10-year cycle. And that's what we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen Bitcoin come up by 1,000 times in the last 6 years
Mm-hmm.
or more.
Yeah.
Right? There was a famous incident where someone bought a pizza and paid 10,000 Bitcoins for the pizza.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Right? That was a great deal for the guy who bought the pizza, thinking that he could just get a free pizza for 10,000 Bitcoins.
Right.
Right.
I've had conversations before with people because, of course, Bitcoin, it has absolutely nothing to do with Silk Road, but it was a method of transacting on the Silk Road, right?
Yes.
And I've often discussed with people, like, what a irony, sort of twist of fate that, people that, are after more unsavory pursuits via Silk Road were kind of forced to acquire this, current, it was probably a pain in their ass. They were like, I got to get this Bitcoin thing so I can get my whatever it is they want to get.
Yeah, get the
and
drugs.
they acquire a ton of it when it's really, really undervalued. And maybe it sits in their account, or maybe they don't get the drugs they want.
You're right.
They've got a couple thousand Bitcoin. And then just a couple of years later, they're like, holy shit, I'm rich.
Was there a case of that?
I imagine there must have been. It wasn't me, unfortunately.
I heard the secondhand story where someone was saying their friend or something was buying drugs on the Silk Road, right, the famous Silk Road in the U.S. And the story was they were paying like 1,500 Bitcoins for the small amount of drugs. And we're like, oh my gosh, 1,500 Bitcoins, if only you had saved it, Yeah. Because 1,500 Bitcoins today is worth hundreds of thousands of US dollars.
I'm sure there's got to be some.
And same thing, like I recently went to a friend's wedding, and I'm going to give him 1 Bitcoin as a wedding gift. Mm-hmm. And then down the road, people say, oh my gosh, Bob, you gave 1 Bitcoin to your crazy. Why did you do that? It's like so much money.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to another interesting thing that I've heard talked about, and that is the early adopters of Bitcoin. And it kind of seems like a scenario like, okay, it could really pay off, or some people could really get burned. But let's just assume that everything we're talking about, although there'll be bumps in the roads, ups and downs, we are going into a future that is going to have Bitcoin as a fundamental component of value exchange, currency, etc.
Agree.
What about all these early adopters, yourself included? Me, unfortunately, not as much as I would like. But, we know a lot of people, that were in early days of Bitcoin that have acquired a lot of Bitcoin. Do you think they're just going to hold on and wait for the golden chariot to arrive? Or what do you make of the potential billionaires coming out of early Bitcoin adopters?
Well, it's bound to happen. There will be billionaires regardless of whether Bitcoin succeeds or not. Mm-hmm. So in a capitalist world, people... The world will not be fair, meaning, people make their bets, do what they want, and then some people will be worth more, some people will be rich, some people will be poor. Mm-hmm. And that's a reality even before Bitcoin, mm-hmm. right? Whether we're talking about the Stanleys or the Vanderbilts or the Rockefellers 100, 200 years ago versus the internet entrepreneurs 10, 20 years ago, right, who made billions in the internet sector, and maybe they'll be billionaires made out of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way it is. So there's no right or wrong. It's just the unfair world of capitalism. Right.
And now I wanted to ask earlier, but does the alias Satoshi Nakamoto, does he have a certain portion of Bitcoins? I'm not sure.
He supposedly has like between 1 to over 1 million Bitcoins, something like that.
So when they were first issued, he just
he was the only one doing the lottery. He was like, hey, every Bitcoin, he would just get win all the lottery. It was 50 Bitcoins a piece each 10 minutes.
Right.
So each day is about 7,200 Bitcoins a day. So for the first day, if no one else played the lottery with him, it was him, 7,200 Bitcoins. Day 2 is another 7,200 Bitcoins. And then slowly he got more people involved. Hal Finney was one of the early people who was corresponding with him, and he, eventually became from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 people, and that's how it started.
So whoever that person or people are probably quite happy with the way Bitcoin has been turning out.
I think I would guess it's exceeded their initial expectations. Yeah, very much.
Now with Bitcoin, I mean, it's we on this podcast we talk a lot with tech founders and people in the startup community, and it goes without saying that in general it's a very fast-moving landscape, uncertain. You're typically with new technologies, with revolutionary technologies and services, you're coming up against the status quo, which means it's an uphill battle in terms of regulations, in terms of many different aspects of the business. So you are in one that I would say is probably more revolutionary than anyone I could currently identify. I mean, we're talking about a new currency, which is big deal.
Big deal.
So how do you, with BTC China, stay on top of the constantly moving landscape of Bitcoin?
In the end, the good thing is we are not. We don't solely represent Bitcoin. We're not Bitcoin, the company. We're not. We are one. We're just one player in a whole ecosystem that's trying to push humanity forward. Mm-hmm. Right. The whole ecosystem is all digital cryptocurrencies, all Bitcoin companies out there who have seen the light, who say this is good technology, and how do we make this available to more people out there? Mm-hmm. What we want is to educate people in the world to say, hey, now you have an alternative. Digital assets are a way for you to to diversify, to hold, to spend, to transfer, whatever you want. You have this choice now. And different companies in our ecosystem do different things. So we started out as an exchange. We're doing much more than that. We've done merchant processing. We've done wallets. We've done mining pools. We've done. We're launching a new forwards sort of futures trading platform. Mm-hmm. So we'll do more and more of these services to bring more digital cryptocurrency solutions to the world. Mm-hmm. And yes, we have to meet with regulators. Yes, we have to comply with the law. Yes, we have to help answer questions and all that. Mm-hmm. But this is part of evolution, right? When the internet came about, it faced a lot of challenges as well. Yeah. A lot of opposition, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of technological challenges, and a lot of adoption challenges as well. So it comes with the game. This is what revolution technology is all about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're here for the long haul.
And a lot has been made of exchanges and other Bitcoin companies that didn't make it, right? And it has kind of transferred an aura over Bitcoin, unfortunately, that I guess increases the hesitancy with a lot of people getting involved. So whether it's an exchange or a wallet company or a number of different Bitcoin companies have, I guess the struggle has been insurmountable and they've had to close up shop or whatever. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because it's so relevant, we know, a lot of people know about the MT Gox
That's right.
Fiasco. So what do you look for from a consumer point of view in an exchange that you can trust, in a place that you can be confident in transacting in and say, okay, and as you mentioned, you're now offering a number of different services, which hopefully we can touch on before we close, but what can a consumer look for, knowing that they can't come in here in the office and see behind the veil and really know what's going on? How does a consumer know to trust an exchange? What should they look for?
This is going to be part of the conversation that's going to happen in the next 5 years as our industry goes through regulation. I firmly believe that because Bitcoin is real, because Bitcoin is here to stay, governments are already taking notice, and governments will take notice and start regulating it. The state of New York in the United States is the first to do this. They've come up with Bitcoin regulation called BitLicense. So they require companies that do business in New York with New York people to obtain a BitLicense, so to speak. And we're going to see that more and more in different states in the U.S. as well as different countries, including China, because I firmly believe that in order for a healthy system where good, honest companies can do good, honest business in this realm, regulation is important to keep the good from the bad, the bad actors, so to speak. So over time, it will be very clear to consumers who are the good actors, who are licensed, who are regulated, who have reputation, who has investors, who has hired a strong management team, put good thinking behind it, providing great services, versus the bad actors who are here for the short term, for hit and run, for the for the Ponzi schemes and so forth.
And of which there seems to be, unfortunately, a few of those actors, especially
in
China.
There are. Yeah. I mean, that's why. Why do you think banks and investment banks? Why are they regulated? Because you don't want people coming up and setting up fake banks.
Right.
right? You can't afford that.
Sure.
You might have fake Apple stores, but you can't afford having people coming up and setting up a bank that's here today and gone tomorrow. You don't want a bank of Shujiahui that all of a sudden disappears after 3 weeks because they took in like $50 billion worth of deposits. Right.
Well, one of the things a lot of people are concerned about is that through that process, the legitimizing the acting in concert with regulatory bodies in order to be more dependable, more secure from the consumer standpoint, will Bitcoin have to give up some of the attributes that make it so appealing? So one of the ones that stands out is anonymity. Will Bitcoin be able to maintain that, or will it have to comply with know your customer standards and things of that nature?
So my answer is very simple. Bitcoin. So we as a company, BTC China, will have to, keep adjusting our processes to comply with the laws and regulation. So we'll do that, of course, whatever requirements we're required to do in terms of KYC, collecting information from our users, and so on. But you know what? For Bitcoin, it's not going to change. Actually, here's what I'm saying. Bitcoin is its own beast. It's an open source software. It's globally run across, multiple thousands of computers and nodes. It's out of control of any single person. Even though we're one of the most famous, largest Bitcoin companies, we cannot change Bitcoin. I, even as CEO, have no right to take away the anonymity feature of Bitcoin.
Right.
Nor do I have the right to change the number of Bitcoins to make it 25 million or make it 42 million. I cannot arbitrarily say, I'm a nice guy. Why don't we have the Bitcoin network give me 3 more million worth of Bitcoin? I can't do that.
Sure.
Right? Because it's decentralized. So regardless of what the governments want or what the company CEOs want, Bitcoin will not significantly change in that sense.
It'll only the companies that are acting as an interface between the customer and Bitcoin will adopt how they will adapt.
Yeah, we as companies always have to obey and abide by the rules of the country that we operate in. So companies will be the ones that change and adopt.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin is its own thing. And
in terms of BTC China, is it only for RMB purchases of Bitcoin? So, I mean, is it basically confined to people in China?
It's not confined to people in China, but primarily we do business. We operate. That's how we started 4 years ago. So we operate primarily out of the renminbi market. For certain special VIP customers, we're accepting foreign currency deposits for certain transactions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a lot has been made of why Bitcoin is so popular in China. Because if more so than perhaps anywhere, those attributes that we discussed earlier are even more in demand here as a result of the way things have been put in place. But can you just comment on why Bitcoin has become so popular here, and how BTC has kind of addressed that demand and what you see moving forward for BTC?
Bitcoin trading is what's been most popular in China.
Right.
And Bitcoin trading, from the beginning of our company, from 2011, that's when we introduced Bitcoin trading in China. I think the Chinese people, due to the state of the economy and all that, I think, China has gone through phases. There was a phase of all these boom cycles, whether it's real estate, whether it's the stock market, whether it's like foreign currency and Bitcoin trading. So 2013 was a watershed year for Bitcoin trading in China. A lot of people came online to trade Bitcoin, and subsequently PBOC issued some Bitcoin rulings, and that scared a lot of people, potential what the central bank might do. But overall, Chinese consumers, we still have a large contingent of Bitcoin traders in China that are trading Bitcoin, what we call speculative trading for profit. And that's how it is, But
that's good for you guys, right?
Oh, it's good for us because we have a lot of liquidity.
Transactions
Absolutely.
on the exchange, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, in China today, there still is not a lot of people using Bitcoin to buy things, in the physical merchant setting or electronically. So that has not taken off yet. Probably that's more prevalent in Europe and North America.
Right.
So what I predict is Bitcoin will be used differently. Because Bitcoin has, 8 to 10 really strong attributes, these attributes these features, if you will be appreciated differently by different segments of the world population. Because Bitcoin actually truly crosses all global boundaries. It's not language specific, it's not culture specific, it's not location specific. It's not political specific, right? So it transcends all boundaries of politics, language, cultures, location, and so on. So different countries, different groups of people will appreciate different features of Bitcoin more so than others. And that's why Bitcoin will be used differently in different parts of the world.
Right. Now, in terms of, there's one question I have to ask you.
Please.
And I watched a presentation you gave before, and you're a bit hands-off in the answer because it is not the domain of BTC China, but you do have probably some insight into this, so I wanted to ask. Nothing earth-shattering, but we all know that China has certain controls on the inflows and outflows of the currency, right?
Yes.
So am I right in assuming that part of potentially the popularity of Bitcoin trading in China was used as a means to, repatriate or convert, currency from one to the other?
For foreign currency, right? Basically your question is whether Bitcoin has been used in China to subvert the foreign currency controls.
That's right.
Right. So my honest to God answer is I don't think that's been a big use case. I do not think that's been a big use case. In small cases, maybe if someone had a few thousand RMB, they try to convert to US dollars, they would do that, buy into Bitcoins and then exit out into a different currency and different exchange abroad. Sure, there's probably thousands of dollars in that sense going, probably a few cases. We're not talking about the millions of dollars of huge amounts. We're not talking about a truckload of money buying into Bitcoin, exiting China. I truly don't believe that happened.
Right.
And the reason I say that is simple because there are many easier ways to get money into and out of China than to go through Bitcoin. So even though the Chinese foreign currency laws only allow 50,000 US dollars worth of conversion in or out per annum per person, many companies, individuals have found many other loopholes to surpass that amount. And none of those involve Bitcoin.
Right.
So the people who did it with Bitcoin are just doing it for convenience, for testing purposes, or they thought it was cool.
Right. But with any luck, as we've been discussing this whole time, hopefully with Bitcoin, the usage of Bitcoin will become easier and easier. So
Yes,
again,
that's
I'm not promoting that, doing that with your Chinese RMB, but at some point in the future, and this may change based on whatever regulations come down through China, but with it becoming more easy to use, maybe that will be something that is a bigger use case in the future.
That's right.
Who knows?
That's right. Yeah.
Bobby, I know I asked you for an hour today. I want to be respectful of your time. I've got a couple more questions. Are you good for another 10 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to ask you more about what BTC China is doing, because a lot of people, there's a lot of Bitcoin companies obviously operating out there, and I think there's still a lot to be determined to how to operate and structure a Bitcoin company. What's the best balance between the services and attributes that consumers want versus fees and charges and all that kind of stuff. So you touched on it briefly a few minutes ago, but can you kind of give me the whole rundown of what's in the BTC China wheelhouse right now in terms of services that you guys are working on?
Yes. So we started 4 years ago as an exchange. So since then we've launched, besides Bitcoin, we've launched Litecoin trading as well. And
kind of pressure from the brother to do that one?
Yeah, Charlie encouraged us to do it. Charlie, as you know, is the creator of Litecoin.
Right.
He created that in late 2011. Actually, I didn't know until much later. I didn't know he created Litecoin until much later. In fact,
how's that possible? You guys not close contact?
No. Well, he lives in the States. He lives in California. I live here.
Right.
We talked, but it's not something. It wasn't a big deal for him, and it wasn't something he bragged about. Like, I'm the creator, So one day, I think it was after I joined BTC China. And one day he said, "Oh yeah, Litecoin, that's me." I'm like, "What do you mean it's you?" I mean, I thought it meant that he was one of the contributors. He's like, he created it. I thought he was one of the 5 or 6 people who created it. And he told me, no, he created it. I'm like, what do you mean he created it? I didn't realize until much later that. And then finally he told me, yes, he was the one who created it. I was like, wow, really?
So he must be sitting on a bunch of Litecoins hoping that things go well, right?
We both wish he was, but he sold a whole bunch at like 10 cents, 20 cents.
Really?
Back then.
I'm sure he's got a little purse somewhere, but
yeah. He cashed out a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyways. So So that's the thing, right? Litecoin was created. His vision was that it should also be. He didn't want to pre-mine it. He didn't want to hold any back for himself. So when he created, because in the summer of 2011, when we both were mining, we saw these other cryptocurrency coins come out. They were all copycats of Bitcoin. One I distinctly remember was called IO coin. And anyway, so we were mining them. And then he said that some of it is not fair because they pre-mined it. The founder, the creator, held back some for himself, so it was a Ponzi
And you can
scheme.
see that with if I launched a coin, you could see if
you could
I
see
held
that someone had already stole a bunch, or not stole, but
kept sequestered them for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Charlie said that for Litecoin, be fair. He announced it ahead of time to everyone who wanted to pay attention. He said, "Hey, we'll start on this date, and everyone can join the lottery on the same time." So Charlie, joined in on the lottery on the same day, along with everyone else. So it was fair. Whoever got the lottery ticket won the first 50 Litecoins and so on and so forth. So he changed the rules a little bit. So there's 84 million and every 2.5 minutes. So slightly different from Bitcoin, but still pretty much based on the same concept. Yeah.
But you guys aren't battling it out at family dinners, right?
Oh no, not at all. We're really really good.
Right.
Yeah. He's I have a sister as well, but we're really close.
Is she involved in any sort of
She's doing her own startup, but she's not doing any cryptocurrencies yet. I tell her you should try something cryptocurrency. She's not doing it. Yeah. So what was your question?
You were about. We're asking about BTC China.
BTC China. Yeah. So we have our own wallet. We used to call it Picasso, and now it's called Just Pay Wallet. So this allows people to hold their Bitcoin, transfer, send Bitcoin, mobile app, Android and iOS. We also do merchant payments. So we now allow merchants in China, both online and offline, to accept Bitcoins through our system. And of course, we have an exchange to help with the liquidity. We also launched a mining pool. We did that last year. So we're now the world, I think, number 4 largest mining pool, about 13% of the world's hashing power. So
does that mean you also have mining power that you're operating somewhere?
We don't. We have very small, just small amount for testing.
Right.
But basically, these are customers, miners in China or around the world who want to join this mining pool to mine together. The idea of joining mining pool is you diversify your chances of winning. It's kind of like instead of holding on to 100 lottery tickets, which may or may not win, you put in your 100 lottery tickets and you pull it together with another 1 million. And now, as long as the whole pool wins, you get a fraction of it. So you have more guaranteed payout.
Right.
So that's what people want.
And what's BTC China's role in that? Are you hosting it?
Yeah, we're hosting it. We're organizing a mining pool. This is our BTC China pool.
And people would participate in that because they trust BTC China?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're one of the earliest, most trusted brands in the ecosystem.
Right.
Yeah. So we have a very large, very we have very really awesome customer base.
Great.
Yeah.
So you've got the mining pool, the wallet, the exchange, of course.
Yes, and then we're just launching, just as we speak. Last week, we're testing our publicly launching our new forwards contract service. Allows people to trade Bitcoin using margin, sort of like a commodities futures type of trading. Yeah. So that's going to come online in the next few weeks.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So at BTC China? I mean, I don't need you to give me any. Actually, what is, if you can share, what's the transaction volume, the average transaction volume in like a week on BTC China? Is that confidential information?
It's not confidential. It's publicly listed.
Right.
So we have anywhere from a few tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins traded per day.
Right.
So these are Bitcoins, buy, sell.
So in US dollar amounts, what are we looking at?
Oh gosh, this is in the in the millions, probably depending on the day. So it really depends on the volatility of Bitcoin. Usually when Bitcoin prices go sky high, then, or if it goes high or goes down a lot, then the activity goes up a lot.
Right.
So anywhere from $5 million US worth of activity to 50 or 100 million. We've seen really big days in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a couple more questions for you, then I'll let you go. I heard you mention something that BTC China launched maybe a few months ago now, but it was some sort of being able to like write your name in the blockchain.
That's right.
Or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't mention that. It's a small fun service. It's called Forever. Uh-huh. Forever is a service that's very innovative, uniquely BTC China. We're the first to provide it. It's a service that allows anyone to now write your own custom message into the Bitcoin blockchain. And the reason it's called Forever is because anything you put into blockchain is forever. Mm-hmm. The idea is that blockchain is maintained by a global network of thousands of computers. that maintain the Bitcoin blockchain. That's a source of truth for all of Bitcoin transactions. Imagine writing your own message in there. In fact, we should do that. We should after our podcast, we should go memorialize our recording and say, John and Bobby recorded the podcast today in Shanghai, Tech in Shanghai, August, whatever. And
Bobby gifted John like 100 Bitcoins or whatever.
Yeah. So then once it's written in the blockchain, then anyone in the world can go blockchain and look at that block, and it'll say that same string of text.
Yeah.
It could be whatever language, Chinese, English, French. You just write whatever you want. But there's a space limit how many characters you can use, and that's called our forever service. We charge 100 million Bitcoins for it, and we think it's great value because you can't get it anywhere else. It's like in some sense it's like graffiti. You could once you write it there, it's forever there.
It's fascinating, and it just kind of sheds light or sparks your brain to think about the possibilities of both Bitcoin and usages of the blockchain. I know a lot is made about the blockchain technology itself.
That's right.
And what can be done with it in the future, and what probably will be done with it. And this service is certainly a fun little service to provide people, but we'll have to save that for another podcast. So hopefully you'll come on in a few months, and I'm sure BTC China will be in a completely different stage and offering lots of new stuff, and I'm sure Bitcoin in general will be in a different stage. So it'll be great to have you back on.
That'd be great.
So just a couple more questions for, as you know, we a lot of our audience are entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, many of whom are in China, many of whom are around the world. And I just wanted to get your advice to them. You're a successful entrepreneur here in China, you're educated in the US, you're in an exciting, emerging, fast-paced industry, revolutionary industry, which is basically what makes all these entrepreneurs froth at the mouth. People want to be involved in something that can change the world, that can be financially rewarding, that can be engaging, but it often gets romanticized a lot, and all you hear about is funding rounds and IPOs and stuff like that. So you're living the real deal, and you're succeeding at it. So I just wanted to see if you could give a piece of advice to the listeners out there who may have an idea, may want to get involved, may not be satisfied with the work they're doing, and want to make that leap but aren't necessarily sure what or how to do it.
Yeah, so doing a startup is great. This is my first time really at the captain's seat, doing a startup, running it as a CEO, as a co-founder. And the challenge, so first of all, people out there, I worked jobs. I worked in industry for 10, 15 years before I did my own startup. Some people do that. Some people do startups right away out of college. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's just what you want to do, at what mood you have, at what point in life. What I would say is, if you were to run a startup, to do a startup, the most difficult thing, or the most important thing, is to find the right partner, and also to hire the right people, right? Because when I was in management for many years, and when we were hiring, when I worked for large companies, we were hiring employees, right? But as a startup, technically we're hiring employees, but what we really want to hire is people who are really self-motivated, people who are really entrepreneurial, right? We know about the ideas of, having communication skills, having self-motivation, but I only knew about these in the context of a large company. Now that I'm running my own startup, these mean so much more to me now. People who are self-motivated, people who have good communication skills, people who have great attitude, go do it attitude. To me, these three phrases mean so much more to me today when I hire people. What I'm trying to say is that I want to bring in partners who really want to go out there and fight and really win, help the company succeed, and not just sit there at the office from 9 to 5 and get a paycheck.
Right.
That's a huge difference. And that's a challenge, how to motivate people to do that, how to bring in the candidates that do that, and also how to motivate our existing team members to do that.
So I guess part of that advice might translate into saying, if you are considering getting into a startup or being an entrepreneur, make sure you're coming at it with a genuine attitude and with a certain set of expectations. So if you're a type of person that is passionate about whatever your skill set or whatever your cause is, and you're willing to work your ass off for it, and you're not expecting immediate payoff, then those are probably some of the right attributes and mentalities to go into this with, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. So my biggest I'm really lucky that I'm doing a startup in something I really love and believe in, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So never do a startup just because you want to be founder or CEO. Only do it because the field that you're doing it in is something you truly love. And in that case, it doesn't matter what role, whether it's a janitor or the front desk receptionist or the VP or the CEO. It doesn't matter because then you're really doing something you believe in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bobby, I know we're going to have you on again in a couple months, but last question, where is BTC China in, let's say, 5 years' time? No, 10 years' time.
In 10 years' time, it's very simple. We will be recognized as the Bitcoin company for everyone.
Globally.
Yes. We will. We have global ambitions. We want to be your Bitcoin company in every sense of the word. We believe everyone will use Bitcoin. Everyone will have digital assets. We will be the provider of blockchain technologies and cryptocurrency services. It's all about these things. Yeah.
Getting goosebumps. All right, Bobby, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today. I know we went a bit over, but like I said at the beginning, I could talk about this stuff for 3 or 4 hours. So I appreciate the time. I hope we didn't overdo it. Where can people get in touch with you or interact with you? Is there any information you want to put out there? Web address, email?
So our website is btcchina.com. My Twitter handle is Bobby C. Lee, BOBBYCLEE.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for people that may be interested in joining the team or asking you more questions,
one of those email
two.
to jobs@btcchina.com.
Jobs@btcchina. Cool. And for us, guys, as you know, www.techinshanghai.com and @techinshanghai on Twitter. And we actually have a YouTube channel now, so you can listen to the episodes there. It's youtube.com/techinshanghai. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Tech in Shanghai podcast. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter @Tech in Shanghai for everything tech from Shanghai and China. See you next time.